Welcome to our series of presentations on Masshealth and Medicare, brought to you by the Northern Hilltown Consortium of Councils on Aging and funded by a service incentive grant from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. My name is Deborah Hollingworth, and the information contained in these presentations has been gathered from observations made over the years as I help individuals and their families understand the benefits and eligibility requirements for both Medicare and Masshealth. Today we're going to focus on how to qualify for Masshealth, because this is a topic that is fairly anxious-making and sometimes overwhelming for folks when they begin to explore whether or not they might be eligible. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. Oh, I could never qualify for Masshealth because I have too much money. Masshealth is what we call Medicaid here in Massachusetts, and Medicaid is a program designed for folks with limited financial resources. You have to have limited income and limited assets. So you may be surprised to learn that Masshealth has different income limits for different Masshealth programs. And there is countable income, and there's uncountable income, there's countable assets, and there's uncountable assets. Countable income, pretty straightforward. Your pension, your Social Security, drawdowns from an IRA, unemployment checks, self-employment earnings, the things that IRS thinks is income, so does Masshealth. Some things that are uncountable would be payments from a reverse mortgage, as long as you didn't take it in one big lump. If you're a veteran and you're receiving the Veterans Aid and Attendance benefit, a portion of that is uncountable income. And I haven't seen any recently, but in decades past I've seen Holocaust survivor checks, and those were also uncountable. But for the most part, all income is countable. Assets. Countable assets and uncountable assets. Masshealth does not count your car or your primary residence. These are uncountable assets. Things like term life insurance policies that have no cash surrender value, funeral contracts, irrevocable trusts. These are uncountable assets. And the rule of thumb for Masshealth is this: if you have an asset and you can access that and get the cash, that's a countable asset. If you have an asset like an irrevocable trust, you cannot touch that in your lifetime. And because you can't access it, Masshealth doesn't count it. So I've had folks say to me, oh, well, my IRA, I can't access that. Yeah, you can. Will you take a huge tax hit or there's a penalty? Yep. But Masshealth thinks about it this way: if you needed a kidney or you needed to pay something that was critical, you could get that money, and therefore they count it. So let's continue here with Masshealth programs that and their income limits and what's allowable. If you're able-bodied, that is, you have medical conditions that are fairly stable, then your income limit needs to be $1,074 a month or less. If you're a little more frail, and perhaps you would qualify for the PCA program because you need help with bathing or dressing or help with your medications, then you could have an income as much as $1,438 a month. And if you were significantly frail and you needed help every day in order to remain independent in your home, you could qualify for something called a Frail Elder Waiver, and that lets you have as much as $2,380 a month. That's a huge difference from that able-bodied income limit of $1,074. So the frailer you are, the higher the income limit that's allowed by these Masshealth programs. asset limit never changes. You could have $2,000 in countable assets or less. However, this is important. You can transfer excess assets. Now, we'll talk a little bit in a while about the 5-year look-back period, but that applies only to nursing home applications. If you are asking Masshealth to pay your nursing home bill, then the asset, they check your assets for the last 5 years, then they check for asset transfers. So that's the famous or infamous 5-year look-back rule. It does not apply to Masshealth programs for people who remain in the community. Remember that you can transfer assets as long as you stay home. Masshealth is not going to care. A portion of the Masshealth application actually asks you if you did that. And you say, yes, I did that. And they will ask you, what did you do? I took this money out of my mother's checking account. I put it in my checking account. Here's the way it looked before. Here's the way it looks now. Here's the number on my account. Okay. So asset transfers are okay unless you are asking the state to pay your nursing home bill. And then you're in a situation where there is a 5-year look back, and they will check to see how the assets were transferred in that time frame. I had a call one morning, 77-year-old widow, incredibly distressed. And she said that she'd gotten a call that morning from her daughter-in-law's divorce attorney telling her to pack her bags because she was not going to have a home or a place to live. They were selling the house because it was part of her son's assets and part of the divorce settlement. So she was calling me to see if there was anything that could be done. And I said, did you transfer the asset to your son? Oh, yes, I did. And this is one of those deathbed promises. When her husband died, he said, please transfer the house to our son. It's the only thing I have to give him. And she did. Transferred the house to the son. It became community property and part of his divorce settlement. So transferring assets has all kinds of foibles. And unless you have a crystal ball that's exceptionally good, it's hard to know if it's wise to transfer assets. You could transfer assets to a child and they could have a bankruptcy. You could transfer assets to your best friend. They could be in a horrific car accident and be sued. And so these are risky asset transfers. Here's another example. Had a call from a daughter who was hoping that her mom could qualify for Masshealth. She'd never applied because they knew she was over asset. Her income was $860 a month, but she had saved $8,000. So here she is, 96 years old. She really needs Masshealth services in order to stay in her home, but she can't get them because she has an $8,000 asset. We're able to transfer that asset, and the recommendation I made was, why doesn't she prepay for her funeral? That's a safe asset transfer. She buys a funeral. If she'd had a car that needed repairs, if she'd had home improvements that needed to be made, there were a bunch of ways where she could have spent down that $8,000 and to the $2,000 asset limit and become eligible for Masshealth. So there are some things that are safe to do in terms of asset transfers, but what I commonly hear from family caregivers is, oh, I put my name on my mom's checking account. Okay. My mom put my name on the deed to the house. I own or I'm on my grandpa's stock portfolio. All right, and these are all attempts by folks to avoid probate by putting someone else's name on the asset. It's never something I would feel comfortable recommending for significant assets. It's always wise to get the advice of an elder law attorney. And we're going to include contact information on how to find an elder law attorney in our area in the additional resources that are listed at the end of this presentation. Recently I had a caller who was over income, not applying for a nursing home, and they wanted to remain in their own home. And they said they knew there was a way to become eligible for Masshealth if they were over income. And I said, yeah, there actually is. Not something I generally run into unless you have very high medical expenses or you have unpaid medical bills. And this is called a spend down. And the way this works is you apply for Masshealth and you're deemed over income. And you get a letter from Masshealth that says you do not qualify for Masshealth because you're over income. People stop reading. They don't read the next paragraph. And the next paragraph in that letter says, if you spend down to, and they give you an amount, could be you need to spend $1,800, could be you need to spend $18,000 to meet your spend down, then Masshealth will cover you. And they give you a 6-month window to meet that spend down. And this is sometimes difficult to understand. Think of it just like a window. It opens. You spend down, meaning you submit to Masshealth receipts for medically necessary goods and services. Maybe you had a wheelchair ramp built on your house. Maybe you purchased a hospital bed. Maybe you had an outstanding nursing home bill that needed to get paid. Maybe you were paying for nursing services to come in every day, and you take all these receipts and you fax them down to Masshealth, and when you have spent the amount that they've deemed is your spend down amount, you will be covered by Masshealth for the remainder of that 6-month window. And that's the part that people forget. I had a situation where a son was diligent. He insisted that he wanted his mom to qualify for Masshealth. And so he began to collect receipts to meet mom's spend down, which was, I think, maybe $2,300. And he collected every single receipt for her prescriptions, for the skin cream that she had to buy, for the new mattress they got for her hospital bed. And he collected these and kept submitting them. And finally, he got a letter from Masshealth saying, you have met your spend down. It was a 6-month window. It took him 5.5 months to collect all those receipts. He was approved, and mom was on Masshealth for 2 weeks. Because every 6 months that window opens again, and you have to do it over and over and over again. So who would ever qualify? You can count a portion of your rent if you're in an assisted living. You can count any unpaid medical bill you may still have outstanding. So for folks who have fairly extraordinary ongoing medical expenses, it is possible to meet a spend down every 6 months. I can't recommend it, but it is possible, and we do find situations where sometimes that's a way to qualify for Masshealth. Okay, I need to talk about an exception to the rule. And this is the Masshealth program called the buy-in program. And why they give these things more than one name, I don't know. It's also called the medical savings program. And both these programs allow you to have an income of $1,771 a month. And this is the most important part, they allow you to have more than $2,000 in countable assets. So if you're a single person, you can have over $15,000 in countable assets and still qualify for the buy-in program. What does the buy-in program do for you? It means that the state of Massachusetts pays for your Medicare Part B premium, B as in boy. And this is what the bill that we forget we have. Every month, if we're collecting our Social Security retirement check, Social Security deducts this year $148.50 a month to pay for your Part B premium. If you qualify for the buy-in or medical savings program, it means that the state of Massachusetts pays that $148.50, and Social Security puts it back in your check. The medical savings buy-in program also does things like pays your deductibles if you have a doctor's visit, pays the deductibles if you're hospitalized. So there are a lot of other, what I call nickels and dimes, fringe benefits that the buy-in program will cover. All these income and asset limits have been for folks who are single. If you're married, it's a different set of income and asset requirements because they consider your spouse's income as well, and assets for a married couple have to be $3,000 or less. We'll talk about another exception, and this is if you're qualified as a Frail Elder Waiver. Frail Elder Waiver, your income can be as much as that $23.80 a month. But the interesting thing about the waiver is that it allows the state of Massachusetts to look at you and your spouse as individuals, to essentially divorce you financially, so that they only look at your income and your assets, and any excess assets can be transferred to your spouse. And the spouse who is not applying for Masshealth can have as much as $130,000 in assets. So that's helpful for folks. And as I mentioned before, the frailer you become, the more flexible Masshealth regulations become. So it's often a very good idea to get some advice at a point when your medical situation changes and you say, okay, now I need some help at home, and I need to know if the eligibility requirements have changed because I'm frailer now. Masshealth has different income limits for different programs. Asset limits are always the same except for that medical savings buy-in program. That was kind of a huge change, first time that we'd seen a different asset limit. It used to be $2,000 if you were single, $3,000 if you were married. And during Governor Baker's administration, he changed that to over $15,000 if you're single and almost $24,000 if you're married, and you could qualify for this buy-in or medical savings program. At that time, there was kind of a huge fanfare because it was the first time they'd ever changed an asset limit. And they estimated an additional 60,000 Massachusetts residents would become eligible for this buy-in program. It's still one of the best kept secrets out there. And if you look really hard at your income and assets and you think you might qualify, it puts that Medicare B premium back in your Social Security check. So if you're single, that's $148 a month back in your check. And if you're married, times 2. So it can be a big chunk of change and a really helpful benefit. To learn more about eligibility requirements or to see if your situation fits any of these scenarios, you should contact a Shine counselor. And you can do that by going through your senior center and getting in touch with the Shine counselor nearest you. I want to thank you very much for joining us and hope this information was helpful. For more information, you can take a look at the following information resources. Thank you.